Mike with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game by Fire in the Head Productions. Back with another video. I haven't done one of these in probably 3 or 4 months due to the holidays and getting busy with gigs, which is great. And not a lot of people are watching these, it seems like, anyway. But I wanted to do one on game mastering. I think the last one was about the upcoming Savage East campaign expansion of Savage Kingdoms, and the one before was about the core rulebook coming out, and I don't know. But in any case, this one is regarding the art of game mastering, the art of GMing. The system I'm talking about, by the way, is this Savage Kingdoms. There you go. Is the core rulebook for game masters and players. Immersive role-playing in a gritty world of dark fantasy. Right. And like I said, I've had videos that already discuss that game in general. But just to quickly reiterate, you can get the book if you don't already have it. Most of my Kickstarter backers have it already, though not all of them do, and I apologize. Those are the ones getting the hardcover once I finally get that figured out, and the soft cover coming to them. Most everybody else has them, or at least the PDF. If you do not have this book, you can buy it on Amazon, Amazon.com. I think it's only like $21 there. Otherwise, it's at a couple of game shops here in Asheville. That's about as far as I've gotten with distribution so far. The MSRP is $24.95, which I'm told is a very good price. It is a 306-page book. It's very material. About the only negative review I've gotten on it is a backhanded good review also, and that's that it's too much of a good thing, that there's almost too much material in here. But that's kind of how I wanted it. So you've got maps. There's not a whole lot of artwork, but most of it is maps, although there's some other good evocative artwork as well. It's just black and white in the middle. The cover, as you can see, is color. Black and white interior. Obviously, if it wasn't for that, it would cost a lot more, I assure you. But yeah, pick it up. It's 60% of it is setting material, so you could theoretically use another game system with the setting, with the Savage Kingdoms known world if you want. And about 40% is the core game mechanics of the setting. I highly recommend using the core mechanics with only slight bias, because it just runs off of a single D20. It's an exploding 20 system, imploding 1 system. So yeah, it's all really good. There's no switch rolls and combats. It all pretty much is designed to run pretty quickly off the single die roll. So enough about that, because other videos have been done. So this is about game mastering. Now this video, and I may even get into the second half of the video, might be for something else, but this video is about game mastering in general. And the end of the video will either be about game mastering more specifically Savage Kingdoms, or I may just save that from a second video. We'll see what happens. I tend to kind of ramble, so it may be a separate video. Anyway, so there's a lot of good material out on YouTube land and beyond about game mastering, or dungeon mastering, or narrating, or storytelling, whatever you wish to call it. But the general term is game master, so I'll just use that, and that's what I use for Savage Kingdoms, because everybody kind of knows it. It should really apply with any of those positions. And so there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's some great material out there. And so I'm not sure if I'll be able to add to it much, but I will attempt. And there's 2 things that I hope to kind of bring to the fold. One is 35 years of gaming, and I realize there's other people that have gamed that long, maybe even longer. So I've been tabletop role-playing since 1979, from basic D&D all the way up through now 5th edition D&D that I've ran a couple times, and even got to PC in to play a character in a couple times. Pretty good system, actually. It's kind of cleaned up. It's quite nice, actually. 4th we tried, but we ended up doing Pathfinder because not only just me, but the entire group was just not really digging. But it's fine. It was what it was, or is what it is, and this wasn't for us, so we moved on. This whole different ball of wax, anyway. Some Pendragon, Firefly, Call of Cthulhu, that stuff, but mostly medieval fantasy, for that's my bread and butter, and that's what Savage Kingdoms is, even though it does skew more sword and sorcery, dark fantasy. It was designed that way for a reason. A little bit lower magic, a little bit grittier world. Game of Thrones meets Conan is a good description of it. So So hopefully from that experience, I can hopefully add a few more things to GMing advice. The other thing is I'm a professional actor and acting coach. So hopefully I'm gonna try to bring some lore, some knowledge from the stage and from the film set, some performance art into it, because gaming, particularly tabletop role playing, is performance art almost. And it almost sounds a little high and mighty to say it, but essentially it is very much, having done a lot of improv and a couple of professional troupes, it is very much like performing an improv scene, particularly short form, or actually really long form improv. Some things don't translate, but some things do, and I'll see if I can hit on some of that. And I teach it and coach it as well, and I coach monologue technique and character building and accents and dialects and all that sort of thing. All your actory stuff, all your stuff you as an actor you use in your preparation for a role. Often, most of that is done before your first rehearsal. So I'm going to try to equate some of that. All right. So first thing to remember as a game master is you are to equate it to film and stage. Again, is that your 5 things? You are director, stage manager, playwright or screenwriter, depending on the medium. Supporting lead, you play supporting lead roles, and ensemble or extras or chorus if it's a musical. So really, it sounded like more than 5. But those are basically 5 things that to keep in mind you are as a game master. I'll break them down a little bit. So as a director is probably the main thing that you're like, although it's pretty similar to being a playwright or screenwriter too. The director, as pretty much all of us know, whether you're in the whether entertainment industry or not, you pretty much know what a director is, and that's the main person at the helm. Has creative final say, has in his mind the overall feel of the final product, whether it's a film or a stage play or a music video or whatever. Kind of the go-to guy. Now your best directors, at least the ones that I've worked with, are organized and they're good decision makers, but at the same time they're also very open to collaboration from their talent, from their actors, from their crew, and therefore will occasionally take some advice and go, wow, let's go with that, or I'll consider it. At least it gives them more options. So, and that's very much what a game master does. You are the main funneler of the adventure, the main narrator, the main director, and you have in your mind generally what you hope will happen, or at least, at the very least, you have a decent command of the setting of your world, which to me is really important, because that way, wherever the player characters go, you can completely handle it. If A, you're good at improv, or at least generally know what it's about, and 2, or B, 1 or 2. The second article being that if your world is really detailed and you're also very comfortable with the rule system, or at least comfortable at making on-the-fly decisions based on the game system, then you can handle virtually any situation, just like an improv, like a master improviser. They can go anywhere, and you're like, oh yeah, they're going in that forest. I totally know what's there, or at least know what I want to probably have there and what's likely to happen. And then you can take a lot of cues off of what they do. And I'll try to break some of that down a little bit more in a second. But let me get through this crazy list. So that's director. Stage manager, because you may be in charge of props, such as music, sound effects, figurines, miniatures, dice, text props such as maps, or if you write written notes that are delivered to the PCs, you might even write them in different languages to represent the different languages in the setting. Those are all props. Fake trees, the stuffed bear that you're using as the giant dinosaur, all of that essentially are properties, props for short. So in that sense, you're kind of the stage manager, or if you're running tech stuff like music. And then another thing to keep in mind is that you are the supporting leads. In other words, the lead, the major roles that are not quite the leads, they support the leads. That's why they're called supporting leads. So those are your major NPCs, such as the innkeeper they interact with a lot, or the high priest at the local temple that they interact with. When I say they PCs. A henchman that's travels with the party almost all the time, or a favored beast companion or animal companion that's has developed kind of a cool personality or a little backstory or history to it. Those are all major supporting leads, and they're not leads because the leads are, of course, the player characters. So that's the PC's job. So they're really their main job as far as performance art would be considered, terminology-wise, is that they have one job, and that's to be the leads or the protagonist. Hold on, I got two. You're also screenwriter or playwright, but that really goes hand to hand, at least from a tabletop role-playing standpoint, with being a director. Although I guess to flesh that out a little bit more, is that you're the one that wrote the adventure, or at least wrote the skeleton of it, or the guideline of it, or you designed the setting. So that's really kind of like being the playwright or the screenwriter. And then lastly, you're the ensemble, or the extras, or the chorus is the musical. So the people that are generally painted in the background. If you describe a dozen people in it, that there are a dozen sullen men sitting at the tavern, several with their cowls pulled up, one bending over a hot bowl of porridge. You just basically, those are extras, those are ensemble. You just sort of painted over them. Now, if a PC decides to approach one of those figures and speaks with them, or pilfers from them, or bullies them, or whatever, interacts with them in some manner, those ensemble characters can suddenly be bumped up to day players. They might have a line or two, minor supporting roles. So anyway, hopefully some of this sort of helps keep it, as long as if you can keep the idea of that you're those 5 things in your head as game master, I think it helps. I mean, it helps me. I don't consciously think about that as much anymore, but at one point, younger or less experienced, I think it really did help to kind of keep that in mind, to sort of quantify things. And in teaching acting is another thing too. Like, we're all actors in a sense, right? We're all performers since since one day old. We act differently around different people. We act differently around our parents. We act differently around our peers, our friends. We act different teachers, around our coaches, around even specific circles within your vast body of friends. We all act slightly differently, and that essentially is acting. To quantify acting further is to start taking into technique, like I'm kind of breaking it down role-playing wise, where you're teaching Meisner technique and truth of the moment, and marrying the action to the word and the word to the action, all this kind of stuff. That can be useful actually as a role player, or improvisational techniques and that sort of thing, doing dialects and voices and that sort of thing, or ways of delivering various lines can also be a different way, or using your face more than just your words. So now, you decided to come here, did you now? That's crazy and probably silly, but anyway, you can bring a lot of performance art to your game mastering, and the player characters hopefully are doing most of that, if not all of that as well. Okay, so now the next thing I'll go to is improv. Using improv. That's like a pretty popular thing now with game mastering advice, and for a good reason, because it works really well. Now, not all of it translates. I'll go over some of that, but most of improv techniques translates quite well to tabletop role-playing, and more particularly to live-action role-playing. The first thing you always hear with people is the yes and technique, or what I like to call do not block an offer, or add to. Yes and meaning, yes and what else? So, for example, I'm in an improv scene. I'm performing on stage with my troupe, and my scene partner walks in and goes, "Hello, Craig, how's it going today?" And I say, "Well, my name's not Craig, you silly man." That's foolish. That's an offer. I just destroyed 5 seconds of the scene. We're completely wasted. Just assume that your name is Craig and go on. Or to build upon, which is even better, is that, hello, Craig, how's it going today? Oh, it's going pretty well, Stephanie. I haven't seen you for 3 months. It's the last time we went to see that movie. So that's building on it. So in the last, that was probably 8 or 9 seconds, you establish that one person's named Craig, the other person is named Stephanie, and apparently you went out on a date. It didn't really say it was a date, but one can assume 3 months ago, and you saw a movie. So all that was done in about 8 or 9 seconds. So that's kind of how you build upon it, build upon an improv scene, and it works pretty well. Man, what is my hair crazy under my hat here? And it works pretty well for tabletop role-playing games as well. However, in tabletop role-playing games, that was an extreme example because you know your name, no one has to give it to you. You know a lot about your backstory. So a better example might be. Here's the typical tavern setting where perhaps you meet all spawned from the prancing pony from Tolkien is where most of that comes from. So I'll just use that as an example, and you see the strange man with a staff in the corner of the room kind of staring at you, and maybe out of play it's a fellow player character, but in play you certainly don't know or shouldn't know, and you observe him for a while, and eventually you wander over his way with a cup of watered wine you just ordered, and offer him the cup and say, the weather today has been quite dreadful, my friend. Well, and maybe you didn't know the weather was dreadful, but that's what you said. So that other character can just add to it and go, indeed, it's been this way for 3 months. The rivers are flooding. And the GM, unless the GM has already established what the weather is like, can just let you go with that. And so you just help the game master there by creating. It's like, oh, okay, I already know what the weather is. Cool, the player character just created it for me. I don't have to worry about making it up myself or rolling on a table or whatever. However, as a game master, you could now in improv. This is one of the things that doesn't always translate into standard improv technique. What I was just talking about there. You do not block an offer. But there are a few times a game master should block an offer. Because, again, tabletop role-playing, though it's similar to improvisational theater, it's actually not exactly it. That's why it's called 2 different things. So the GM could block an offer by saying, let's use the same example. The weather's... the weather's been dreadful outside, my friend. The GM could cut in. Though but he could or she could come and cut in and say, well, by the way, just to let you know, actually, it's been, there hasn't been any rain for a fortnight, or this is the dry season of the year for this region. And the only way I would do that as a game master, to just break that cool little flow that they had going, is that it's very important to the setting. If you're in a desert realm where, in fact, rain is really rare, then, maybe don't let them say that it's been raining for 3 days, or let them say it and the player can just appear to be mad, or maybe he's bluffing or something like that, make it part of the character. Or you could block another scene when anything to do with setting, like for example, recently I had a character, I guess he kind of forgot that it was Savage Kingdom setting is more of a Dark Ages setting. There's actually some very classic ancient world cultures, and there's even a couple of cultures that are kind of reaching the early Middle Ages era. But in general, it's kind of a Dark Ages. And anyway, he was looking for this big musketeer type hat with a huge plume out of it, and I just kind of said, well, I mean, you could possibly find a tailor to craft one particularly like that, but you don't really have anything to go on for that. There are no cultures that really that are really producing that. So just to let you know, it's not really Renaissance era. And he was, oh yeah, cool. Sorry, I didn't really think about that. So yeah, so it was just a block, only to just, it wasn't even really a block. It was kind of a guideline. It was kind of a channel, and it helped him. It corrected him a little bit. He now knew, and it helped me to help him out. So yeah. So yeah, the only time the GM should sort of block an offer is when it's quite obvious, like it's against theme, or it's against an obvious fact. I let the players create. To give another quick example on this little subject matter, the player characters recently in a campaign I was running had entered a part of my setting that wasn't as detailed, which is pretty rare because it's a pretty detailed world. I've had the roots of this setting since 1983. And then when I designed Savage Kingdoms, I detailed even more because I'm like, well, suddenly I'm producing a game, so I have to like put even more detail into it, layer more stuff, and history, and religion, and politics, and culture, and dress, and that kind of stuff, traditions, and everything layered on top of it. But anyway, in any case, they still managed to enter an area that I wasn't as familiar with. And on my maps, and there's a town there, and of course I know the general culture, I know the general deal, but there's no detail of what really is in the town. So, assumed there was a tavern, and we just got, I was like, sure, there's, I decided there was a tavern, maybe 2 ale houses, probably not a big one. It was a small rural settlement on the edge of the wilds, and it was a culture that really wasn't known for public houses. I mean, there were, but they're not, as big of a deal. But, I just let him say there was one. I think when the others even said, I've heard of the Black Dog, he just like came up with a name. And it sounded cool, and I'm like, sure, yes, you're indeed correct. This is the town of the infamous Black Dog Tavern. And they entered, and between those two and myself, we all just kind of created, and it can even make you look cool as a game master. You're like, indeed, yes, you've heard correctly, or you are correct. It almost makes it look like, oh wow, you actually had that. I just happened to guess, guess tavern there. Clearly, he already had it there, and I just guessed, wild guess and got correct. So you can kind of blend it all and make yourself look kind of genius when in fact it's actually the player characters that came up with it. So now, the opposite of that, and here's another time you can block, or a good reason to block a player is to challenge them. In a recent session, I don't even think it was Savage Kingdoms, it might have been D&D 5th actually, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. They were guarding a caravan, and there was a wagon full of supplies. The merchants had planned on a 3-week journey, so they had all manner of bedrolls and food, and not only the cargo, their merchandise that they were selling and trading, but their life, their living supplies were on this wagon. And they came to a flooded river on the trade route. They were trying to figure out how to get across, how to ford this river. It was fairly deep or something. Anyway, one of them had the idea. It was at the edge of the forest, and they were going to chop down a tree and like build a bridge or find, I don't know. They were going to get the wagon across with the tree in either case. So he rifles through all the wagon material. After I said there's all kinds of supplies in here, and I never really quantified exactly what it was because nobody had really searched in there. He was looking for an axe, a woodsman's axe. So I knew the guy was very creative, and so I said, no, you search for minutes, and he might even rolled really high on his perception and found some other things that were interesting, but didn't find an axe, not even a hand axe. And honestly, there probably should have one been in there. But I blocked him so he would come up with a different way, and sure enough, it worked out. They came up with a more interesting way to get across the river, because they eventually did. But it spawned some cool role-playing stuff, and like a dark secret of somebody was spilled in the process, and I don't know. My point is, it was such a more incredible and creative scene than just chopping the tree down. There's an axe, and you chop it down. So so look for ways to challenge them. So not yes and is mostly a good thing, but sometimes you can block with creative impunity in order to open up other other ideas, other possibilities for the narrative of the adventure. Alright, so those are a couple of tips using improv techniques for game mastering. I guess I'll probably wrap this up fairly soon. It's already at like over 24 minutes. But another thing I'd like to add is, and this has been touched upon by other game masters and better video than me, I'm sure, and that's engaging all of the senses. Now we have 5 senses, right? And some would say 6, which definitely gets used, or should get used, in game mastering. So when describing a chamber or a crypt or a tavern or a castle's great hall or a temple or a library or an underground cavern or a seaport or the cargo hold of a ship, don't always just engage the visual senses. Engage the hearing. What sounds do they hear? Not just talking. I mean, most sounds are other things, non-conversational. The dripping of water, the chattering of a rat, the sound of the wind howling across the docks or down through the tunnels of the sea cave where this legendary group of pirates once hid this incredible jewel called the Crimson Fist, etc. And smell, and most people probably already know this, but that holds the most memory. That records memory more than any other sense, even more than sight. It's a proven scientific fact. So definitely engage that one. What do they smell? Is it musty? Is it the smell and stench of blood? Is it urine? Is it dung? You know, it's all nasty, but it does help to create. Is it fungus? Or going the opposite way, do you smell sweetmeats and sweet breads and pastries, or strawberries, or apples? So yeah, and almost every scene has a smell. Probably even more so than audio, because there are places in real life to where you hear almost like nothing. It's just completely quiet. But it's very rare to not have a smell, an aroma somewhere, even if it's just like the aroma of, moss or wet wood, or wet fur or something like that, wet grass or whatever. And then taste too gets disrespected, or not. It gets overseen a lot. I mean, apart from the obvious, I bite into the leg of mutton, and the GM might be like, it tastes really good. But instead of just saying it tastes really good, you could, your mouth explodes in a cacophony of flavor. You've been on the road for 3 weeks, nothing but dried rations and that squirrel you shot about 10 days ago and skinned very poorly. And now you get this cacophony, this orchestra of various flavors in this civilized feast that you're at. Or even it's just a simple tavern meal. But beyond food, I mean, you can, you taste the astringent blood, because smell and taste are, as we know, are somewhat married together. So sometimes smells are so accurate or so powerful that you taste them. At least your brain tells you that you taste them as well. So you can always describe taste, non-food taste as well, such as blood or musty odor, or dung. I hate to. That's nasty. Steel has kind of like if you're inside of a forge or a smithy's, shop or something like that. So yeah, so describe taste even before someone actively says they're putting something in their mouth is always kind of good. Yeah, wines and ales, even potions and various elixirs of alchemical concoctions can have different engaging and exciting flavors and or aromas to them. And all of this, of course, is to, right, we all agreed, it's all for immersion and ultimately for enjoyment. And I probably should have quantified this at the beginning of the video. This is more for those players and GMs that are more interested in an immersive style role-playing game. Now, it doesn't have to be creepy immersion where you're just like, it's every method actor is over in the corner there. It's like a French film that everyone is just very quiet for a while, and you give a strange look on occasion, and perhaps they say a strange throwaway line that no one understands. So it doesn't have to be art house all the time, but in general, there's my crazy. In general, the more immersive the game is without being too creepy, the more, almost without fail, the more enjoyable it will be, unless you are specifically wanting to play a lighter beer and pretzel style game, which is completely fine if that's what you choose to. But if if you're selling your game as being very role playing and immersive, then you better well deliver, or at least make a pretty good attempt at it. And that's probably another good point, just to throw it out there as a game master. When you start a campaign, regardless of what system you're using, you may want to kind of give everyone a quick briefing about the theme of the game, or the general feel or atmosphere of it. Savage Kingdom's supposed to be a little darker and grittier, but you could, if you wanted to, theoretically run a lighter game. But I think you owe your audience, your players, you all owe telling them that, if that's going to be the case, because they may come in expecting sword and sorcery, and suddenly it's Dragonlance or something. Not to knock it, but it's something lighter or whatever, or Harry Potter or something. Or if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, then you probably expect some dark horror stuff and some investigation, and not Roger Rabbit, the role-playing game, or whatever. So yeah, so just come clear with what you're trying to do. Yeah. So most of this advice is for immersive-based role-playing. You engage the senses, roll with the punches, let the story build, let the PCs build on it, you build on it, you build on it. Don't block a whole lot of offers. The game really flows when you just add to it. I mean, block things when you have to, like I said, in case you're trying to challenge the players, or it's a thematically weird thing. I'm going to go buy a night Buick on the marketplace. Well, it's a medieval fantasy setting, so no, or vice versa. So yeah, so don't block, add to, engage all the senses, perform. And here's the last thing, and then I'll finally end the video, and I'm going to save part 2 for game mastering Savage Kingdoms, and particularly next video, which is what I thought was probably going to happen, because here it is, over 32 minutes, but hopefully it's been good so far. The last thing I was going to add is when you're a game master, and same as a player character, but even more so in my opinion as a game master, as a GM, is make sure you perform, make sure you engage. We're not all natural actors or storytellers or whatever, or voice actors. However, when you take the job as a game master, you should know that part of that is on the docket, is on the resume. So yeah, try to adhere to some of that. And it doesn't mean, if you can't do a bunch of accents, or a bunch of different accents, or different voices, or whatever, if you're not really particularly gifted at that, there are still other ways of portraying different vocality, or different vocal personifications of different characters. Some of that is slowing down the way you talk for different characters, or make them a lot more faster for different characters. What are you talking about? Of course I saw the guy. He went down the road. He's the leader of the bandits. He stole everyone. Or, lower your voice somewhat. He was the leader of the bandits. He went that way, down the road.
Or higher it a bit, of course, whatever. Now this voice sounds silly. It's a bit Monty Python-ish, but it's another actor trick. If you commit to it, you're very serious about it, and you don't break, and you're character about it, especially if you stop waxing sad. My poor daughter passed away in childbirth. That was that second child I lost in this many years.
So you could do a silly voice, but if you commit to the character and you make it serious and don't really break, you will sell them on it. I assure you. They'll be like, they might laugh at first, going, "It's that crazy Monty Python voice again," but as you describe the character in play, you're like, wow, we feel this is kind of a cool, gritty sort of character. Maybe we should stop laughing. So yeah, so there are different ways, different timbres of your voice, different ways of portraying certain characters. And the poor, I know it's a stereotype, but when you play more of a poor character, he's out in the streets and all, people like to use Cockney and all that, because you're not as educated and as edgy and as gritty, and you sort of learn. Whereas the nobles, of course, are more educated and they hit their consonants more often. They speak a bit more assuredly. So just a couple of things, a couple little notes. If you do want to learn accents, the easiest way I would say, simplest thing, the way I teach it, you take 3 lines. You watch. Say you want to do a vaguely Scottish accent. Go watch Shrek, and repeat several of his lines. You irritating beast of burden, or whatever, several times, over and over. And once you get those the way that they flow in your head, then move on to another line or sentence, or even a small paragraph or a small monologue. Master those, and after you do enough times, usually it's 3 to 5 times, that accent, the vocal pattern, is pretty much etched into your brain. You can do it with about any sentence you come up with. Same with German or Jamaican or different accents of American. You can do Brooklyn or whatever. Or you can do, hey, right down in the hills up there. Get her done. So just listen to different phrases, repeat them over and over, and you'll get it. Other than accents, like I said, in summary, you can use the pacing of your voice. And also, one last thing, because this segues on what I'm talking about with different characterizations. Don't be afraid of the silence. Is something I tell my acting students. So if someone is trying to make a point about what's going on, don't be afraid of the silent pauses, the pauses in one speech. They can be very powerful. Those beats and pauses, you need to be doing something. Again, I'm teaching more acting stuff here, but I guarantee you it can be used as a game master. If you're behind the screen, or whether you use the screen or not, doesn't matter. They will focus on your face, and you'll find yourself performing more and not having to describe, oh, he looks sad, or whatever. Instead of saying he looks sad, you can look sad. Or, he looks sort of angry, dudes. You can, be angry. Instead of describing it, you can do it on your face. So, use this. 80% of communication, and therefore acting, is actually nonverbal. As a game master, you have to use verbal more, of course, because we're having to paint pictures and do more than just perform as one character. But still, keep that in mind. So do not be afraid of the silence, the pauses, the facial expression. I keep doing the same one. I can do more, I promise you. Various things. So don't be afraid of that. So that's all I've got right now. This video went a little longer than I was hoping. I was shooting for about 30 minutes, 35, but anyway, we're at about 38, almost 38 now. So if you're still with me, thanks for watching. I will do a part 2 for game mastering. The next one will be, I'll focus more on game mastering Savage Kingdoms in particular, maybe add a few more little tricks and tips. Hopefully they're helping some people out there be better. I know some of the stuff I've watched has helped me as well, so it's all give and take. It's all building upon each other, right? Alright, so until then, I've been Mike with Savage Kingdoms and Fire in the Head Productions, and I will talk to you guys next time, once I figure out how to click this video off. Alright, take care. Happy adventure.